Janet. We begin, as we usually do at this hour, with the morning brief. And looking back to yesterday and what Miles called in the morning brief, everyone's favorite hipster economic data report, the JOLTS report, the job openings and labor turnover survey is what JOLTS stands for. And you've had this ongoing theme where you've been looking at the restaurant industry in particular. And if you look at it through the prism of JOLTS, it's pretty much what one would expect. That is, there are an awful lot of openings in the restaurant industry. This is anecdotally something that we've been talking a lot about as well, seeing a lot of help wanted signs on restaurants.
Yeah, so the way that I went about repackaging this data, the two sets that I looked at to get a picture of what's going on, because the JOLTS report for May was actually pretty interesting. It sort of showed not a lot had changed in the labor market since April, where we saw, quits were elevated but not continuing to rise. And we saw, as we see here in the data, and also the number of jobs open, 16,000 higher in May than April. So essentially nothing changed. But when we look at the ratio, you look at the restaurant industry, so the food services and accommodation sector, and you look at the number of separations within the business that are quits. So this is of all the people who left their job in the accommodation and food services space in the month of May, 80% of the people who left that job quit that job. That is a record high for this series. Now, in those kind of full labor market, let's call the maximum employment type years we saw at the end of the 2010s, this was around 70% or so, floated back and forth depending on the month, even though these are seasonally adjusted numbers. So to have a record number of quits as a percent of total separations shows, Julia, and I was just trying to tie it back, how can we make the anecdotes we all can feel and know are true? How can we make the data confirm some of that? And I think this, to me, helps to explain a lot of what we're seeing, the staffing challenges we're seeing at the restaurant level, because not only do you have a lot of staff turnover, but you've never had this much staff turnover that is the result of workers quitting their jobs. Now, whether they are quitting to take another job in the same space, another job in a different industry, whether they are quitting to not work anymore, all of that you can just go ask someone, and that's going to be, what we had several 100,000 separations last month. So, if you want to get on the phone and start calling 800, 900,000 people why they left their job, feel free to go do that. But just as a percent of the churn within that sector, a record percentage of it is quits. And I feel like that, to me, says it speaks to the central tension, I guess, right now within the labor market, a labor market that, granted still has a long way to go to repair itself, but one that, is exhibiting, let's call this a late cycle dynamic, very early in the current economic cycle.
Miles, I know you joke, but I would love someone to get on the phone, not me, but I would love someone to get that, because that really is the central question of all of this. This is sort of central mystery that we keep talking about with jobs, which is, where are these people going? To your point, are they quitting and taking a different restaurant job that pays them better or has better hours? Are they quitting because it's summertime and they want to go hang out on the beach, or take a restaurant job in a beach town, which so sorely needs them, as we have heard from people who have traveled to places where restaurants are closed some of the time because they can't find people? Are they quitting because it's summertime and they need to take care of their kids? I don't know, but that's something that we've all been really persistently curious about. And so I don't know, maybe somebody will invent a bot to make those calls and get that information. I wish they would.
Yeah, and look, we can, we don't need to do a debate on the merits of, going and calling 20 people versus looking at this data and the stories that you can tell. But I think, again, the reason that I like the data to tell the story is because at the aggregate level, this speaks to what is most likely to be the case in a given separation situation, right? You call a couple business owners, they talk about the 17, 27 people who work for them and their individual stories. Well, how does that check out? And I think, again, this data speaks to some of those challenges that we see. If you go into a diner and you see help wanted sign, what does that say about the state of their business? And I think that this data explains to us that a lot of those challenges are related to folks quitting. But again, a story that certainly is not going to go away, and that I know will be a feature in future morning